And so we come to my senior school days, and I'm going to split this into two videos to cover all what went on there. But firstly, I'm going to tell you what my school report was from my junior school. So this is what went with me when I went to the senior school. It says English. So we had English language. There was 25 maximum points, and I got 8. So the teacher said I was weak. And then English composition, out of 25 points, I got 5. Very weak indeed. And then spelling, out of 10 points, I got 2.5. Very poor, could do better when he likes. Then writing, out of 20 points, I got 7. Poor, makes no attempt to improve. And then reading, out of 20, I got 12. Fair, has made some improvement. So well, at least that was a bit of a help, wasn't it? And then on the arithmetic side, we had the mechanical, and out of 25 points, I got 12. So fair, has improved. So, and then the mental arithmetic, out of 25, I got 5. Could do better, was the comment. So out of a total of 150 points, I got 50.5. The number in the class was 31, and I came 29. Well, at least I wasn't bottom, was I? So there you go. So the general remarks from my form teacher were, I have a feeling Stephen could do very much better if he would concentrate on his work. He's a naughty boy and can be very disturbing influence in the class. And my headmaster says, I note that Mrs. Edge, that was my form teacher, like Mrs. Gregory, feels that Stephen can do better. Behaviour leaves much to be desired. So there you go. That's how I went to senior school. So I went to Herbert Kay High School in Rugby, and then on arriving on my first day at the high school there, I remember we were all eventually ushered into a big classroom. So we were all together, and we were going to split up into A, B, and C, so 3 different distinct classes. And so we were there, and they took all the names, and for some reason my name wasn't on the list. And so eventually the headmaster, Mr. Evans, came in, and Mr. Evans, he always wore one of these teacher's capes. He didn't wear the mortarboard, but he wore the capes anyway. And so one of the teachers that took all the names says, we've got all the names, but such and such, so and so, Stephen Orange. And when he mentioned Stephen Orange, the headmaster, oh, I've heard about him, he said. I thought, oh, there you go. And so that was that. And then about a day or so later, we were still there. We did some exams and things like that. And so the headmaster came in again, and he'd go around the class and he would ask the boys, because it was an all boys school, what was the name, and so oh, I knew your brother and he did well, and everything. Oh, very, very friendly and everything else. And then he came to my partner in crime, and he said, what's your name? And he told me, oh, he says, and he pointed to some innocent boy next to him and says, and who are you, Stephen Orange? Poor lad. Anyway, he says, now I've heard all about you, he says, and I'm not going to take any nonsense and anything from you or have any trouble. And then he carried on going around the class. And eventually he got to me, of course. He says, what's your name? And I said, Stephen Orange. Oh, he says, and of course I got told off again that he wasn't going to receive any nonsense from me, that he'd heard all about me. So that was a good start, wasn't it, to my senior school year, right in front of everybody, but never mind that. So that was my first day at school. And then later on, I actually learned from one of the teachers who I got to know quite well. He says, you did come with a very bad reputation. So that's life, isn't it? So that was it. So events around this time, basically it was 1963 to 1965, which was my first 2 years at senior school. And I well remember the death of President Kennedy. and I was in my grandmother's house in Windsor Street, watching an old black and white telly. We didn't even have a telly in our house, so we thought it was great going to grandma's on a Friday night and we could watch a bit of telly. Then suddenly the news flashed, and what's this? And we were told that President Kennedy, firstly, had been shot and then he died. So all my generation, they could all tell you where they were when they got the news of President Kennedy assassination. And then the Beatles arrived. Well, that was something, wasn't it? And they hit the scene 1963, 64. And we all loved their music and everything. And we all wanted to grow our hair and wear Beatle boots and everything else. So that was something. And then Winston Churchill's death, 24th of January 1965. And because, you know, we were post-war, but I remember our teachers telling us, you know, how important he'd been as the Prime Minister during the war, etc. And so by then, actually, we'd got a TV. So the subsequent state funeral, and I was heard to say, because I mean, a state funeral, and some of you would have recently seen the Queen's, you know, where they got the gun carriage and the naval people and they move it around and there's this and all the pomp and everything else. And I was watching it and I was heard to say, I think he's more trouble than he's worth. Well, there you go. That's how much I knew about it in those days. And then on the 29th of December 1963, my grandmother died. She was aged 73. And then about 6 months later, or 4 or 5 months later, Ted, my granddad, came to live with us in our house, and he lived with us for 12 years, which really brought on the intensity of my mother. Having living with her dad, who, you know, I certainly was in no doubt she had a poor opinion of him. And so we were both living in the same house. So the intensity of my mother warning me about, don't you grow up like him, and everything else, that was the case. To be honest, I didn't quite understand what to do, all this, that, the other. I took life very, very casual as it was, but there we go. That was the intensity of that. Oh, and then the police came to our house one evening, as I had received stolen cigarettes at school from 2 of my school pals. So they were the sort of pals I was with. We were split into A, B, and C, and basically I was at the bottom of the B, and we used to share some classes with the C. We'd split up for metalwork and woodwork and things like that. So I was still sort of in touch with some of my old partners in crime, if you like, and they'd been watching Z-Cars. Now, again, my generation would know what Z-Cars was. I do as the police. And they'd seen how somebody had papered up, the 2 lads had papered up a window, put honey on it, and then they'd smashed the window. And of course, it didn't make any noise. And they broke into Whittaker's off licence, took boxes and boxes of cigarettes. Of course, all they could do was bring them to school and hand them out. Well, of course, eventually they got caught. And well, they sang like canaries, really. And my name was up, and they got the address. And in fact, I was out that night with one of the chaps who had broken into the thing, and we were overstayed. Honestly, we were just looking for trouble, really. And so the police were there, and of course, when the police asked me what I did, of course I couldn't say I smoked them. I was more frightened of my dad than I was the police. I was, throw them away, I said. And anyway, there was no official action taken, but I was marched down to the police station one Saturday. They took me in there, and I stood in front of the police inspector. And the first thing he said, "Get your hands out of your pocket." So I took my hands out of my pocket. Basically gave you telling off. And well, thankfully I was never up in court for stealing stolen goods. I was up in court again, but we'll find out in the next couple of videos what that one was about. But certainly never got caught stealing again. So that was something about it. So, and then it was decided I needed some more education and instruction. So it was arranged to me visit. There's a couple that came from Scotland, Isabel and Douglas MacDonald, and she was a teacher, and they thought I could benefit from getting some more instruction on maths and English. And so decided I would go down Saturday for probably a couple of hours. Of course, I wouldn't receive any payment for it. They said, no, but what Stephen will do will help Douglas do some practical work. Well, that sounded a good idea, on paper anyway. And so I'd go down for a couple of lessons, and then Douglas would be doing various things in the garden and in the house, and I was there. And Douglas was quite pleased because he felt he could pass on these practical skills to me. Well, I wasn't much good at the maths and English. I'm probably even less good at the practical skills, but that's how it went. And but what really happened, and what I look back at with great memory, is that they were so kind to me, and very often they'd ask me to stay for dinner on a Saturday. And Douglas's brother Ian would come up, Uncle Ian as we used to call him, and he would come up and we'd sit and have a lovely dinner. And they treated me as an adult, and they were so kind. And I discovered one thing: I could make them laugh. Now, Douglas had an asthmatic sort of wheeze of a laugh. You'd get him to laugh because the wheeze was so funny. And it's a skill I learned with them, because if nothing else, from the English, the maths, and the practical work, I was to take with me. I remember one day, and Isabel reminded me of this once, and it was a winter time, and I was in there, and the snow was beginning to thaw, and there was icicles, and Isabel was explaining something to me, and she said to me years later, I thought I was getting through to you. Then all of a sudden you looked out the window and said, I think that icicle is going to fall any minute now. She thought, oh. She later went on to actually teach dyslexics and learnt the skills that were required for that. And of course, this was early days in her school teaching, and the only thing she knew was to do it was conventionally. So there you go. That was my early years, in the first 2 years at school. We'll see what happens in the next 2 years in the next video.